All right, and welcome back, everybody, for yet another episode of American Soccer Junkies. As always, this is Dan Popko. I'm here with my good friend Steve Fogarty.
How's it going, everybody?
And once again, we have another full show, a lot to talk about. Just finished up the U20 World Cup in Turkey. You got the Gold Cup coming up in about a week, and silly season, the July transfer window just opened up today. By the time you listen to this, yesterday. So there's a lot of rumors. Some MLS moves already going down. It's interesting. A lot of ramifications for the U.S. national team. But to start out, let's travel to Turkey, where there was a disappointing run of games for the U.S. U20s. It was a group of guys that they weren't expected to really do that much. They got stuck in the group of death: Spain, France, and everyone's favorite African team, Ghana, and they left with 1 point from 3 games and 9 goals conceded. Not the best performance. Forty, what are your thoughts on that team?
It was really interesting because there were certain players that showed they belong.
Yeah, there's a couple guys out there that clearly
international youth level, and then there were other players that were just completely out of their element, particularly on the defensive side. It was Havan, obviously. He was bad, but it's hard to expect a guy who wasn't even starting for a Pac-12 team to come in and play the likes of Spain and France.
Yeah, I agree. Apologize to all listeners for some hopefully temporary audio difficulties coming in that right there. But yeah, it definitely was. That defense was makeshift. And even when they had what you assumed, that the first game against Spain, when you're missing who's the guy who's supposed to be your best center back, Shane O'Neill, and he's missing against the U19 UEFA champions from last year, it's probably not going to go well. And Gerard Delafeu and Jesse made sure of that. They each scored a brace, and it was just they torched them. Torre was a disaster. It was Stanko was not good in that game. One thing that I find curious is that you're trying to get some stability along that back line that is clearly missing, clearly lacking in the first game. So you take Caleb Stanko, he wasn't good, but he was by far better than Torre, and he was the captain, and you bench him for the second game and leave in Torre alongside Shane O'Neill. I thought that was, even though it ended up working out against France with the draw, I think that was an incredibly questionable decision by Tab Ramos.
Yeah, Torre was directly responsible for the first 3 goals. It was his fault against Spain every time. He didn't belong on the field, and it's hard to justify the fact that he got put on this team over a guy like Walker Zimmerman, who has been training with FC Dallas in the MLS, and I don't know how somebody who wasn't starting for their college team. Americans college soccer is not the highest quality of football going around. So, and then Stanko is a defensive midfielder who's basically forced to play in center back just because of the incredible lack of depth that we had. And it was very interesting to see that this was a makeshift defense, which is essentially what's going on at the senior level, where you have guys like Matt Beasler and Brad Evans and DeMarcus Beasley, guys who a year ago you would never have expected to be playing, crucial World Cup qualifiers in defense, and it's really transferred down to the youth level.
Yeah, and this is the team that's supposed to be directly feeding into that senior team. And as you discussed, there are guys that are in that pool of players that weren't there for one reason or another. Walker Zimmerman, who was injured throughout the cycle, and that's why Ramos said he left him out. And then meanwhile, he plays 2 games while the U.S. is away in Turkey, and scores a goal in one of them. Comes from the back, and he played 2 games with FC Dallas. Then you have guys obviously like John Anthony Brooks, who continues his waffling. And then Will Packwood, who double leg break, he probably won't be back to full fitness until 2014. it's just it's interesting. It's interesting that beyond Gonzalez and Beasler, and they're youngish. There's just not a lot of depth going on at the center back position, especially. And fullback I leave out entirely because that position's never exactly been a glut of talent for the U.S.
Yeah, and at fullback, DeAndre Yedlin showed a lot of promise.
Yep.
But
and fantastic hair.
Great hair. But against Spain, he really wanted to get forward, which when the players you essentially have to cover for, Torre and Stanko, one is completely overmatched and the other is playing out of position. I thought maybe Yedlin should have, taken it back a little bit, let the midfielders run the offense instead of completely trying to get involved all the time. And I think it really hurt them. There was a play where he was trying to get back and he essentially fell down. I think it was the second.
Yeah, it was Delafuse. It was Delafuse first.
Yeah, was it Delafuse goal?
Yeah, it was his first one.
And then Osegueda on the other side, who he wasn't impressive.
No.
He seemed athletically overmatched, and I think big things were expected from him coming out of Guadalajara. Oscar Sorto didn't really get much run, so it's dire straits in terms of the defense because there aren't many options right now, and we're essentially starting two midfielders in the fullback roles for the national team, and the central defense is makeshift too, but life goes on. They're going to have to start developing defenders here.
Yeah, I think as you said, Yedlin, he's a guy. I agree. It should. On his side is Delafeu is on his side, and that entire Spain game, every time he got forward, Spain. Like I thought it was incredibly interesting. I wrote this in the recap on the blog that Spain pretty much was playing a counterattacking style. But they were doing it they were playing like an underdog, but they were doing it with far superior talent. So every time they went on a counter, it was quick, it was deadly, and it was devastating. It's because Delafeu and Jesse got wide, and they had the speed to take on those completely lackluster fullbacks and overwhelm Stanko and Torre in the middle. And with Yedlin coming so far up the field, it left so much extra space for them to run into. But at the same time, he did show some promise, and he is playing on a game in game out basis with Seattle, which will help his development. I think he's one of the guys that come next January when it's time for that next January camp, and that I think he'll be one of those guys who comes in and plays in those friendlies with the full national team. We can see maybe what he can do with some of those other fringe guys going forward.
Yeah, what I really liked with him is that athletically he wasn't overmatched. He just got caught out of position. So a full season in MLS, he'll become more of a tactically sound player, and out of everybody on the defense, he obviously, I think, has the most upside. Shane O'Neill is good, but I think his game pretty much translates to, he's going to be that lockdown center back. He might not be the best one out of the bunch. He might be your second or third center back, but he has a future with the team. But Yedlin has a chance to become a star. Yeah.
I think it was an interesting, first on O'Neill, he's just learning to play center back himself. He only switched over this year. But Yedlin, you think he has a pedigree, too, in addition to his athletic ability. He played for Caleb Porter at Akron, who is a great coach, great tactical coach. And right now he's playing with Siggy Schmidt in the MLS for Seattle. And I think he will get down some of those fundamentals, some of those basic ideas. And he will be a player who we'll see with this national team with probably the beginning of the next cycle is probably when I expect to see him. And he'll definitely...
Yeah. He also has the hometown thing going where he's playing for his hometown club and he's essentially learning how to be a pro at home. So that really will help his development. And as he gets more consistent reps with MLS, he's just going to improve. The sky's the limit for him.
Yeah.
Where I'm worried is we're not developing anybody else. The best chance we have is if John Anthony Brooks makes a commitment to the United States, and nobody knows if that's going to happen at all.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see where the U.S. defense is in the next cycle, because it's clear that we're all developing incredible talent in the midfield, and to a little bit of a lesser degree going forward with the forwards and the wingers.
Yeah, One last point on Yedlin, and something you mentioned just triggered me thinking about this with that homegrown talent thing in the MLS. I think that has helped massively. This is the first kind of class where we've seen a lot more guys that are signed as homegrown players. I think you make the point that these guys get to play close to home. They get to develop with some of the same teammates. It hasn't. Yedlin might be probably one of the better guys to come through there. Diego Fagundes in New England's really good player. Pineda is a homegrown guy for Chicago. Fagundes also isn't a U.S. citizen yet, but I digress. But I think you'll see that so far it's started to produce guys that maybe they don't quite look like they'll be the stars, but they give a solid baseline. They raise the bottom line of talent for the U.S. team, even if they don't bring in the next great guy. But moving forward, as you talk about those midfielders and those attackers. There was no one that really stood out in qualifying in the CONCACAF tournament. It was Villarreal who was the best player, and Gil was great. Gil was great the first game. He was okay against France, and then he kind of had a very downward trend throughout that tournament. But he's a player I think could be very good for this U.S. team going forward as well.
He and Benji Hoya seemed to play better together. When Hoya was gone for the Ghana game, Gil was really, it seemed, out of his element, which was surprising because he was so good against Spain. Obviously, people will look towards the goal, which was a wonder strike, but he was good going. For the 90 minutes, he was probably our best player.
He created a lot of little chances just because the U.S. did control possession, and their issue for much of the Spain game, aside from the porousness of the defense on the counterattack, was their ability to find that final ball to get a goal. And the closest we ever came was through Luis Gil's little 1-2s in the box, little through balls that didn't miss by this much, or another player messed up, or Spain just not rooted it out. But he seemed to be very close to unlocking the defense many times.
Yeah, I agree. The forwards weren't really, getting that last touch. Rodriguez was good making runs throughout, but he couldn't finish.
Yeah.
Hernandez he essentially disappeared.
Disappointing.
And Villarreal was not good.
No,
he was missing his free kicks into the box, not placing them right. He seemed a little overwhelmed, which is surprising considering he's kind of in the same boat Yedlin is, where he's playing consistently in MLS.
Yep. He was the star of the CONCACAF, and he kind of just gave a no-show in Turkey as well. Rodriguez, you bring up, I think he has a lot of talent. He's only 18. He's one of the younger players on his team, playing for Kaiserslautern, German team. Struggling with my umlauts today. But he's a guy who will get better. He is young. He won't be around for the next. I don't think he'll be eligible for the next cycle. I need to double check that. But he'll be around. He'll be around this team in the future. He might take a little while longer to develop. Another player that I thought was actually probably one of the more impressive players for the U.S. in Turkey, Daniel Cuevas. He was the little winger. He scored the goal. Scored that pretty little goal against France. But he was utilized more as a super sub, which I'm not sure if Ramos. I'll give Ramos the benefit of the doubt on that one. I do think Ramos is good for this team, even if he kind of made some questionable decisions around this roster in this tournament. But I think maybe if he knew Cuevas is better off the bench than starting. But I think that's a kid that has a lot of talent.
Yeah, he really played the Benny Feilhaber role where he came in and he made things happen. But I think he was the type of player that if you brought him in against Spain, it might have helped. Same thing with Mikey Lopez, who came in off the bench to start, and he really made things happen as well. He was connecting on passes. He had ideas, and it just seemed like we could never get that right, perfect combination together where you had a bunch of guys with talent, but it seemed really hard to utilize them. Do you keep Hoya, Gil, and Cuevas on at the same time? Do you keep Hoya, Gil, and Lopez on? And they never really seemed to figure it out. And I think that's why all the possession we had, it never really amounted to anything other than a missed opportunity here, and
yeah, finding that right combination, I think, was a problem that you saw a little bit during qualifying too. It seemed they went with a kind of different look most of the time in the CONCACAF tournament. It was a lot of Will Trapp and Mikey Lopez. Will Trapp played the most minutes of anyone throughout the cycle, I believe, and he got the armband in that second game, the France game, when Stanko was on the bench. But I think in the ideal world, you kind of see Stanko pushed into that position as well. And then you have even more problems trying to find a combination, because do you want to rely on the more, if you're trying to build something more like the full national team, you'd probably put a Lopez and a Trapp back there, or maybe Hoya as the number 8 and Trapp or Stanko or Lopez as the 6. But then what do you do? Because Hoya can also play out in the wing, but then you're taking time away from either Cuevas or Rodriguez can play wide, or Villarreal or Gil. There's a lot of talent there, and I think now that they don't have to worry, it might actually help them that they don't have to worry about working together to find that right combination with this team anymore. They can kind of plug and play with the full national team, develop as pros in their club sides. I think that'll help their development more and give us a better idea of what they can bring to this team in the future than them trying to figure it out on the fly with just too many of the same type players in the squad.
It's also difficult because you're having players like Hoya and Gil who are really polished, just professionals who have been at it a lot longer, going up against guys who obviously have a lot of talent, but really don't know how to utilize the talent in a way that can be beneficial to the team, which is why Villarreal's performance was really surprising. I expected him to be the person that would be able to connect with Hoya and Gil and really bring something forward, because Mikey Lopez has a lot of talent, but nobody's really seen him play. Nobody knows what he can do. It's really hard to ask a bunch of 19-year-old kids to really give this great effort, especially going against Spain, where you have guys like Jesse, who's they're grooming him to start for Real Madrid right now.
Yeah,
that's how good these guys are. It's no joke, and I think obviously it looks like we gave up 9 goals, scored 3. The effort wasn't really shown. It was a lot closer than a lot of these score lines indicated. Ghana was it was a nice back and forth game. Spain, we had possession, but they were really toying with us. And then France was played fairly evenly.
Yep.
So, disappointing from the results end, but in terms of just the way they played, there's promise there for the future, especially in the midfield. Mm-hmm. Gil might be able to play with the national team right now the way he played. Hoya, if he starts getting reps at Santos Laguna, he's another person who could, be a factor for the national team before his 21st birthday.
Yep. One other player I do want to talk about from this class that I haven't really gotten into, we're talking about this defense, Cody Cropper in goal. Coming into this tournament, I was very hesitant on him. He looks kind of like a loose cannon. We discussed his Twitter at some point on our Twitter. Looks kind of like a crazy person, like a legitimate, insane person. But he stood on his head for the beginning of that Ghana game until that awful fourth goal. He played great against France. Spain, less so. But he doesn't inspire the greatest confidence. He seems to be a little inconsistent. But I think as a shot stopper and as someone who can command his area, he's a big kid. I think he has a lot of promise for this team too.
Yeah, he really, you could take his performance and it really is a fair representation of the entire team. A lot of talent and a lot of promise, just hasn't put it all together. There were moments of brilliance, and then that fourth Ghana goal, there were moments where he had no idea what he was doing. And you like the enthusiasm, but yeah, we talked about his Twitter account. He's a scary dude. So hopefully he continues to get run. I don't know if he's going to get called up to the main squad at Southampton. You don't want him sitting on the bench and playing against, some bumblefuck team in the FA Cup, and that's all he's seeing. He's one of those guys that a move to MLS wouldn't be bad.
No, because he's had a little bit. He's been around in England a little bit. He's with Southampton. He was dropped by Ipswich Town, I believe, at some point, and and that's when he got picked up by Southampton. Southampton does not exactly have the most stable goalkeeping situation in the last year, and he obviously they were trying to survive in the Premiership. They were trying to play more older, experienced guys. It's hard for a young goalkeeper to get some run. You even see Brad Guzan. He didn't really start playing until this year, and he's 20. How old is he? 27. So it's goalkeepers do develop on a generally later path. But I think if he can start getting some reps, loan him out somewhere in the lower tiers of football league, League 1, League 2. Just to get him some playing time. I think he's the kind of guy who could be in that same discussion with the Hamid, with the Johnson. I think those guys might have a touch more. They're a little more athletic. That's the one thing that you look at with Cropper, and you see him going for some of those balls, and he gets there, but it doesn't always look the prettiest. It's almost like watching Corey Crawford for the Blackhawks in the NHL, where he's a great goaltender. But he is there because he has good positioning. He's a big guy. He's not there necessarily because he's athletic and can make those highlight reel saves. But he's another guy, another intriguing prospect from this team. As we talked about, it'd be nice to see him make a little move this summer. But already, to move on from the U20, a bunch of players have already made their moves this summer. It's been active in the beginning of the transfer window. And just before the transfer window for some U.S. national teamers. The first couple moves, couple MLS guys, and you see today Carlos Bocanegra signed with Chivas USA. Recently, Clarence Goodson, only a couple days ago, joined San Jose Earthquakes. And the third move that's happened recently, Danny Williams moving on to the championship in England, play for Reading. What are your thoughts on those moves, Fogarty?
I'm just going to add the Eric Lehigh to Nottingham Forest in the championship. Yeah. We'll get to that, I guess, when we start talking about Williams. Bocanegra isn't really much of a surprise. Ever since Rangers basically went under, his career has been in flux. Racing Santander just got relegated again. So this is probably his best chance to revive his career. Playing in Los Angeles... or not Los Angeles, Carson, which is essentially Los Angeles. So he'll be right there. Klinsmann will be right there. And Chivas is a mess.
They're an absolute mess.
They suck. I mean, they can't stop anybody. So if Bocanegra can come in and turn the defense around a little bit, I know one man doesn't do that much. He has a chance to revive his career. Goodson is essentially coming into the heat of an MLS playoff race, which... He lost his spot at Brøndby. He hasn't been good for the team. This is another chance for him to revitalize his career. And many people assume that MLS is where careers go to die, essentially. But this is a really good, a lifeline to Bocanegra and Goodson to try and get their careers back on track. Bocanegra really, I think he wants in bad for the national team. And Goodson is currently on the team, but is behind a whole host of players. So he needs to, get his stature back to where it once was.
Yeah, the one worry with Bocanegra is that team, as you said, Chivas USA is an absolute mess. I was reading today. They're one of the few. They're the only MLS team that I can think of that doesn't really value. They treat draft picks like the New York Knicks do. They will trade him away for nothing. They'll throw him into a deal just because they prefer to bring their talent in from Chivas Guadalajara on loan or for other places in Mexico on loan. So they traded up like 15 spots in the allocation in order to get Bocanegra. So that team is just a financial mess. They're a joke. No one shows up to their games. But Bocanegra will. The one thing you can say is he will walk right into that starting lineup, and there will be no one to challenge him. So I think that getting games whenever he's fit, he will be playing. I think that will help him maybe get back some form. It then depends just if Klinsman's ready to write him off for a career, or he's willing to give another chance.
Yeah, and obviously the other thing is, he's 34. He could have just gotten old. It happens in all sports. You age, you decline.
Yep.
Not everybody's going to be Cafu playing until they're 40. So
Cafu.
It's going to be interesting. And I think we'll know right away where we are with Bocanegra.
Yep.
I mean, you're not expecting Chivas USA to start winning games because, like we said, they're awful. But if they start playing better, maybe he can, come in and lead these ragtag bunch of players to at least start doing something, other than being the laughingstock along with DC United of MLS.
It's the ABC Family Sports movie you never knew you wanted.
The Big Green 2 starring Carlos Bocanegra.
La Grande, how do you say green in Spanish?
Verde.
La Grande Verde. So yeah, I agree with Goodson. I think it'll be a little more of a fight, but I think that the fact that team will be playing highly competitive games, as we've seen, Klinsmann has no problem calling MLS defenders, no problems giving major time to MLS defenders, and MLS is getting a lot better. I personally, in my opinion, I think the level of play is on par with probably, I'd say, the bottom half of the championship in England. It's that same kind of long ball. A lot of teams are very similar, kind of long ball, tough, hard-nosed style. I think that if Goodson can perform well, he'll put himself in a good position to keep being picked, stay as that kind of third, the Jay DeMerit pre Bocanegra moving to left back in the last cycle kind of player. And I think it's a good move for him. I agree.
And San Jose is a solid defensive team, so it's not like I don't think he can just walk in there and claim his spot. I think he's going to have to earn it.
Yep.
Their problem is they can't score, so obviously he's not going to help that. But they're still only 4 points out of a playoff spot, and there's still a lot of soccer left to be played this season. So it's pretty interesting how they're going to try and give it a go. I don't know if it's going to help. Goodson obviously has the advantage that he's a little bit younger. He's 31, it's old in terms of soccer, but he still might have a little bit left in the tank.
Yep. And I think you look at that team, and he's going to be playing around a couple guys that are also fringe national teamers. Justin Morrow, who I believe he's on the Gold Cup squad, or he was, if not, Tony Beltran is, right?
Yeah, Tony Beltran.
Yep. Justin Morrow was called in for the last as strange call up last time, so he's a guy on the fringe. Steven Beithauser is another guy who's been. There's been a lot of calls for him to be brought in as a fullback. So there's guys that have talent around him in the back line. I think that'll help if they can gel and he can show some leadership and he can come in and claim a spot. I think that'll really help his case with Klinsmann.
Yeah, and he's playing for a team that expects to be good.
Yep.
They have solid players. Obviously, Wando's the big name there, who's having a down season, but Bellucci is there.
Salinas is all right.
Yeah.
Lenhart's a crazy person.
Yeah, it's
Alan Gordon.
It's Alan Gordon who I can't stand, but there's a solid group of players there, and it's going to be interesting to see where Goodson fits in.
Yep. Now moving back across the pond to a couple other moves that have been made. Start with another defender. We're talking about defenders. Eric Lehigh moving to Nottingham Forest. What do you think about that move? Dropped by Aston Villa, dropping down a level of championship. I don't think necessarily hurts him, but what are your thoughts on it?
I think it was a lifeline. Because it's very hard on a player who went through the Aston Villa system, at one point earned that starting spot on the back line and then lost it, and then basically was told, get out, we don't want you anymore. And I think playing at Nottingham Forest, which will, a mid-level championship side, they'll probably finish anywhere between 7th and 14th. It'll help. I think he'll be able to get playing time because he has the Aston Villa former starter on the resume, but he needs games. He waited really long for his opportunity at Villa, and then he didn't really ever have a chance to sustain it. And he's still young. and he's got talent. I mean, I've seen enough Aston Villa games. He has talent. He just needs to keep getting reps, to keep, getting into different situations on the field, and learning how to react to certain things. And I think it's a great move for him.
Yeah, I think as you said, the playing time is huge for him. He's been wildly inconsistent because I remember I think it was one of his first league starts for Aston Villa. He was there playing against Tottenham, and he was shutting down Gareth Bale for 60, 70 minutes very tightly of that game. Gareth Bale got a little loose at the end, but I don't think he scored. But just even holding Gareth Bale scoreless last couple of years has been an impressive feat. But he was going toe-to-toe with them, and you thought, all right, this is the moment that he's going to step in and take over this team and take over this spot and come in for the United States and take over. It hasn't really transpired that way, but I think this is a good chance for him to get involved. The championship, as I was just saying, it's not a death sentence for your national team hopes in the least.
And you have to take into account he was at Villa, which is a high-profile club, and they've really been stuck in the mud for the last few years, so they're trying different combinations just to get something to work. And I mean, he got left out. He hasn't played for the United States national team in over 2 years, which, I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, 2 years ago, I was basically penciling him in as the starting right back for this World Cup cycle.
Yep.
So if he starts playing well this year, he has a chance to get back on the radar, and he can play. And the championship, it's a league that moves pretty fast. They'll have multiple games a week, so we'll see how he does.
Yeah, looking at that team, they brought in a number of defenders in the last couple of years, but there hasn't, aside from Maloney, who's not on the team anymore. They not too many of those defenders played more than. You have Hutchinson played only 5 games. Harding 28, Collins 33. Collins and Harding and Halford all played around 30 games. They're all still there, but there's games to be played. In the championship, they play 46 games. Plus, you have the different cups. He'll get his chance. I mean, you look at Nottingham Forest. Robbie Finley got a chance there. He'll get some playing time. I'm hoping should be good for him. The other move in England in the championship, Danny Williams. That came out of left field for me. I don't know about you. When I go on Twitter and I see Sky Sports reporting Danny Williams signed from Hoffenheim to Reading, and I had to do a double, triple take. I hesitated before even posting on the blog because I was like, "There's no way." I thought he would stay in Germany, but another player who I think getting back in the regular run of playing games, he fell out of favor at Hoffenheim at the end of the year last year. I think it'll help him. I think it could also showcase maybe that Klinsmann was overvaluing him as far as a player for this U.S. side.
I completely agree 100%. And Reading is a team that they're going to be looking to get back to the Premier League this year. And they're a team where their strength is probably in the midfield. And I think that he's going to have to, work for playing time. He's not just going to get it handed to him. Because you said he basically, flamed out at Hoffenheim. This is another chance where a fresh start. And I agree that I think Klinsmann overvalued him too soon. Because he never found his niche with the squad, which was a problem. So now, what do you think? Do you think he's going to start right away for Reading, or do you think he's going to have to earn his place in the squad?
I think he's going to have to earn his place. I'm looking at the players that Reading has. I'm not sure exactly their movement has been from last year. But you look at someone like Mikael Leiterwood, who played a lot last year. He plays in the defensive midfield, which I'm assuming is where they're looking to slot in Williams. I'm not sure if they're going to try to pull a Klinsmann with them and shift them all around the pitch. But he's been playing a lot for them the last couple of years. You you look at some other guys. Danny Guthrie plays in that midfield. He's the kind of guy. He might not be starting. I could see Williams taking him. You have someone like Hoge Akpan, who's a young, talented player who's hungry. He's 21. That's when he starts to think that he maybe wants to get a little more going. And then even
Jimmy Cabay on the wing.
They just signed.
If you wanted to play him there, I don't think Williams could take his spot. No, I have seen enough Danny Guthrie at Newcastle to know that Danny Williams could take his spot because Danny Guthrie's not that great. So
they also brought in their Reading, the other major signing this summer, Royston Drenthe, a man with some Real Madrid. He's been down the last couple of years, but he has that Real Madrid pedigree. So just taking up, even if it's not a Danny Williams spot, taking him another spot on that pitch where you start thinking, well, where does Danny Williams quite slot in here?
Yeah, even if you tried to use Williams as a defender, you'd obviously rather have Royston Drenthe in there, he's got the Real Madrid on the resume, he's got the Everton on the resume, and he's been capped for the Netherlands in the last few years. Hasn't played really that much. I think he only has 1 or 2 caps, but he's another talented player, and Reading is going to take a shot at this to try and get back to the Premier League, and if Williams can play any kind of big role in that, it really bumps up his chances with the national team, because there's no way they're going to leave a player like that out.
No, but I think one thing that it does kind of highlight is you look at the level that he's signing at, and yeah, perhaps he could have signed somewhere for a lower tier Bundesliga team. He could have signed for a team at the bottom of the Premier League. Obviously, Reading is one of the top tier championship sides, but you start looking at other players like one of my favorite U.S. national team players who's kind of fallen off the radar the last couple of years, Jonathan Spector, and he's moved to that kind of center midfield for Birmingham City, also in the championship, also a highly competitive team in the championship, and he's consistently playing week in, week out. If you start to look at it, you see Daniel Williams slipping off the radar. Does Klinsmann really have a leg to stand on with the support of him, or should someone maybe like a Spector or other the U.S. has depth in the midfield. You know that we are always pretty critical of Danny Williams. So to think that there's other players playing at a similar level and it's just kind of some nepotism, it can be a little frustrating. But obviously, I wish Danny Williams well. I would any more players for the United States that can get some good experience and good playing time and good minutes. It'll help. But I think it just kind of sheds some light on the value of him to some teams out there.
Mm-hmm. And the thing with him is that we thought, we never expected him to come in and maybe take the 6th role by storm, but there was versatility that we expected from him, and obviously we haven't seen it. And his biggest thing is obviously he's German-born, which gives him a little in with Klinsmann, or so we like to think.
Yeah.
This will be really the indicator of where Danny Williams is as a player. And come October, when those final qualifiers are played, we'll know where he is. And it's really, it's 50-50. He'll either be with the squad or he'll be way off the radar like Jonathan Spector, which, both of us, I think, are fairly flabbergasted by why he's not playing more for us. But, that's life. And it's up to him to make the most of this opportunity. Yeah.
Just looking at this, I didn't even put this together. One of the reasons, looks like one of the reasons they may have chosen Reading as his place to go. Gylfi Sigurdsson, who's now with Tottenham, played for Reading and they were friends from Hoffenheim days, and spoke a good word about Reading to Danny, helped bring him there. But a lot of those, I know QPR just went back to training today, so you probably see a lot of those English clubs starting to get back into training in the next couple of days, and we'll start to figure out where he stands in Reading's plans going forward.
Yeah, and we'll see how he performs in the friendlies prior to the start of the season. So we'll definitely keep tabs on where he goes and all the transfers as they continue to come in.
Oh yeah,
players will start moving.
Yeah,
we already have 4, and it's been day 1.
Exactly. I mean, you could see Danny Williams is the kind of guy who we look at it was like, oh, maybe that's a kind of crowded midfield, but it's not that crowded, and at the same time, it's just the beginning of the transfer window, and Reading is one of those teams that just dropped out of the Premiership, and those teams tend to see a couple guys move that would rather stay in the Premiership. So I'm not sure which of those guys, maybe later would, but from the look of Reading, it looks like it's a pretty open race for that midfield. So I can see Danny getting his reps. Have you heard any other rumors out there lately about any other U.S. movement?
Josie Altidore is essentially being linked with everybody.
Of course.
Sunderland seems to be in the mix. Alejandro Bedoya, it looked like he might have been moving from Helsingborg to FC20. That looks like it's cooled down. But now I'm hearing Feyenoord might be involved, which is another Eredivisie team, which would be fine. I think he's ready. He's making a move up.
Yeah, I think a move to the Eredivisie would be perfect for Bedoya.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything in terms of any of the younger kids like Diskerud or Gat. I think they're staying put for now. And nothing else really. It's quiet because of no Clint Dempsey, obviously. That was the big thing. Yeah. But Altidore is obviously the player to watch.
I think one of the things with Altidore he didn't talk to the media all during the last run of games for the U.S. Seemed to work out okay for him. But so he comes back and starts talking. He goes on, I believe it was Soccer Morning with Jason Davis, and he says something to the effect of, "Yeah, I'd be open to going back to England," which basically means it's a non-story. It's a non-starter story, but because it's the start of the transfer season. And every non-story is a back page story that got blown up and saying, oh, what English team is he going to? I'm still not sure it's 100% locked in stone that he goes to a team in the Premiership, but I think Sunderland would be a good fit for him. I mean, as we said, he has to be somewhere that he's going to get games. That's the one requirement.
Yeah, and they're looking to switch things up. So they had a fairly disappointing season last year, and he's probably right now looking at, I just threw up a 30 spot for my club, and I've scored 4 straight for the U.S. national team. It's time to get paid. So, I mean, we don't think he's going to stay at AZ, and I think he's earned the right to move on from AZ, but it's really hard to gauge when there's so many clubs interested, and, you know, you have a club dropping out every day, and then another one will come in and say, oh, we're coming in with an offer, but like you said, it's important he goes somewhere where he can play. A few podcasts ago, I was reading off the names like the Man Cities were interested in him. That's an absolute disaster if he goes there. He'll get loaned out, probably to some team like Brighton and Hove Albion, and he'll be muddling around in lower level football in a worse position than he was if he had just stayed at AZ. So it's important for him to stay in a place where he can play and he can continue just to get quality time and, you know, play with different people and, most importantly, keep scoring.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Sunderland before. You look at Sunderland, and that's kind of squad. He could get playing time, but the team he has to fight for a spot. Because you look at Stephen Fletcher is there. He's a good player. Danny Graham's a big target forward. Those are 2 bigger guys. Connor Wickham is also in that role, but I think Josie would take him fairly easily. And then you have Stefan Sessegnon, who plays in the hole a little bit. He can either play in the midfield or play in that offset forward role. And it's tough to see. I mean, I think Josie could take those places. I think Sunderland is a type of situation where it'll test him to the right level, but he has to. I know Paolo Di Cano is a little bit of a crazy person, so he'd have to get in good with the manager. He has to get into a place that he's comfortable in that situation.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a better situation than some other teams. A lot of these English teams have high-profile strikers where he's not going to be able to get into the squad. Even my team, Newcastle, has Papi Cisse, who appears like he's going to stay there. Newcastle sucked last year, and they have a pretty good forward situation, so if he's going back to England, it has to be the right situation.
Yep.
And I'm looking up Wickham now, who's young. He's a young kid. He
He's been struggling.
He hasn't scored, which is, I mean, the one thing where if you're a striker, you got to get goals, and he hasn't done that. After Graham made his move, he didn't score. So maybe Sunderland is the right fit. And if they pay a pretty penny to bring him over, it's not like he's just going to sit on the bench.
Yeah, I've been seeing fees in the realm of probably, if he's going to England, probably 6, 7, 8 million pounds. Not 6, 7, 8 pounds.
Yeah, solid fee. The one downside is I'd have to start rooting for Sunderland. That would suck.
Yeah, it's not a fun time.
No.
At least it's not Stoke City.
Yeah, they got Peter Crouch still. I like Peter Crouch.
And they have two U.S. guys, Breck Shea and Jeff Cameron. But
more important, they have Peter Crouch. But yeah, no, the two U.S. guys are. It's always nice when you have the U.S. guys grouped together, which is why it was painful to root for Rangers 3 years ago. They had guys from the U.S. at every position. So
yeah,
it's going to be interesting. Altidore hopefully gets moved sooner rather than later. We don't want this becoming a messy situation like where Clint Dempsey basically left Fulham hanging at the end last season. So, and Bradley and Jones, they don't look like they're moving. Cameron looks good, and those are guys you don't want moving. So,
one guy I hope might either get in with good favor or go up. I wouldn't mind him going out on loan somewhere. Breck Shea. I think he needs to get back in a play. I need to get his confidence back. And if he's coming in for 10-minute spells for Stoke City, which is not a team that's either going to be throwing it forward in those last 10 minutes or trying to. I mean, I guess Mark Hughes will change the culture there a little bit, but I don't think that might be the right fit for him. I think if he went on loan, maybe somewhere out to a league in Belgium, the Netherlands, I think a more open league, I think that would help. That would benefit him tremendously.
What he did was like what Altidore did when he left the Red Bulls, or I don't remember, was it the Metro Stars or the Red Bulls at the time?
I think it was the first couple years of the Red Bulls.
He basically took the first move that was available, and it wasn't necessarily the right fit. And Shea was really good for FC Dallas, and I think it was just too big a move too soon. And he's really, I don't think it's even on the radar right now because he's been hurt. But I don't think he's in the plans for Stoke City, which they play a really boring style, which doesn't suit him at all.
Well, the one thing is Tony Pulis got canned because the owners didn't like the boring style. So the hope is that Mark Hughes, he was coaching at QPR last year, so I've seen his managerial tactics, and he got fired because QPR was down at the very bottom. So I don't particularly like his managerial tactics, but that's personal preference. He also was with Fulham for a while and did well there, but I'm not sure that he's the right fit for that system either. I think Shea needs to figure out who he is as a player too. I think it's also on him a little bit, Yeah,
I agree. And that's a team where it's going to be tough to break in. They have players who can play in that midfield, so it's going to be interesting. And just because you have a new manager and you're going to try and change the philosophy doesn't necessarily mean that the players are going to be able to really translate what they've known for so long. And I don't know, it's going to be interesting. I can't see him breaking into the team just the way it looks right now. They have a pretty solid group of players. I mean, you have your Steven Nzonzis, your Charlie Adams, even a Kenwyn Jones can play on the wing. Wilson Palacios is there. So it's Matt Etherington. So it's going to be tough for Shea, and I think, maybe the loan to a championship-level squad would do him good.
Yeah, I think he needs to just get he's another guy who just needs games under his belt. But I think that chance, transitioning now over to talk about the Gold Cup, I think that returning to Stoke and not being on that Gold Cup roster, part maybe some rehab stuff still going, but partly because he needs to get, it's beneficial for him to get in good with that new coaching staff and not be showing up to training camp a month late.
Yeah, and they don't need him in this midfield. This midfield is probably the strength of the team.
Yep. One other thought before we get into previewing the Gold Cup about the roster for the Gold Cup. One guy that just came out today who appeared, we saw his name on the initial list. We did a double take, but then got really excited about Bobby Wood for 1860 Munich, and he apparently Klinsmann wanted him in this squad big time, but 1860 asked for him to come back because they have big plans for him. They're still a second Bundesliga side, but he's a guy to keep an eye on, even if he might not be with the U.S. national team in a camp until maybe the friendly in August or something.
Yeah, I think it's welcome news. When you have a club that's really begging to bring a team back, it's club stability or a second-tier tournament. And with this team, with the forwards they have, Bobby Wood isn't necessarily essential to have him in now, whereas you'd rather have him become the starting at 1860 and then work his way in. So yep. I'm fine with what Bobby Wood, the plan. It's good that 1860 and Klinsmann are on the same page when it comes to him.
Yep, I was happy to hear about it. It would be nice to get him involved in the fold because he hasn't been in the fold for a while. But I agree, it's more important right now with that team to go get some reps, score some goals, and we'll talk to you next time we need an extra striker in camp.
Mm-hmm.
But you look at this team. I guess we'll start with the forwards because that's what we're talking about. You have Donovan, Gomez, Wando, Will Bruin, and Jack McInerney. 4 MLS guys and Hurt Gomez. Obviously, the big name here is Donovan. What does he bring in his return to the U.S. National team? Gomez, I think it's just about seeing if he can. I'm hoping to give him some time up top as a striker because he's kind of pushed around on the left. Looks like he might have lost his place. I want to see what Jack Mack can do. Will Bruin, another guy I'm curious about. He's still young, 23. He's been slumping a little bit for Houston Dynamo. And Wondolowski, I think this is his last chance. I think if he doesn't show something now, I think he might be out of the fold for Klinsmann.
Yeah. I don't know how Will Bruin got on this team. He's had one really good game this year where he had 2 goals, 2 assists against DC United, the worst team in MLS. He hasn't scored, I think, in his last 7 games. Yesterday against New York Red Bulls, he didn't register a shot on goal in a game that was fairly wide open throughout. I can't believe Juan Agadelo's not on this team. I'm just going to throw that out there right now. I think this could be McInerney's time to shine. He has been so good this year for Philadelphia.
Yeah, and he's been great.
In the preview, I basically anointed him the MVP, where right now it might be a 2-man race with him and my boy Mike McGee, who can't get on this team. But Donovan is listed as a forward. I think if Klinsmann goes to the 4-2-3-1 that he's really gotten to his liking now, I think Donovan has to be locked into that right wing right now.
Yep.
Gomez...
He could be on that left wing. You never know.
Yeah, I think, though, he'll be on the right. Just Donovan, he's second in MLS in assists, and hasn't played for basically a third of the season.
Yeah.
So that's pretty impressive. Gomez's fitness is obviously a concern. And Wondolowski, who came off a 27-goal a year, he only has 5 this year, so he's not exactly in the best form. So, yeah, I think this is his absolute last chance. Number one, he's old. He's 30. And if he has a good tournament, he could sneak onto the World Cup roster, a la the way Robbie Finley and Edson Buttle did last time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be at the expense of someone like Terrence Boyd, which I don't like to see, or even a Herc. But I think in the system we're playing right now, and with players like Dempsey, where he's kind of playing as almost that second forward, but playing from a little more reserved midfield role, it changes the complexion of how you look at the forwards of this team. You look at them because a guy like Donovan is you could put him as a midfielder because he's playing essentially on the right of midfield, up in the wing a little bit. He's obviously an attacking player, but I think it's more qualifying. Even Gomez in his role has played that. I think you're looking at the true guys that are going to be playing up top in this team. It's going to be Wando, Bruin, and McInerney. And McInerney's he's leading the league in goals, and he almost had another one last week, absolutely robbed by a ridiculous save by Luis Robles. Was 2 weeks ago, actually, I guess. So yeah, he's been in great form. He's as we're talking about. I think he's a guy that I think he should be given the first crack at this starting spot. In my opinion, I can see them going to Wando, but I think I think McInerney is the guy who could step in and become the star of this team.
I agree. It's higher risk, high reward because McInerney is not the biggest guy in the world.
Yeah.
So asking him to be that lone striker, whereas in Philly he has support with guys like Leto and a whole bunch of other guys. They're a fun team to watch.
They are.
But Bruin and Wondolowski are bigger guys. Bruin, obviously, he hasn't scored in a long time. Wondolowski isn't playing as well. So I think McInerney deserves the first shot. And if he comes in scoring goals, I mean, you have a future star on your hands. You might be looking at a player who could be making a move from Philly, and it's important, I think, because you need to get depth behind it out the door. Boyd seemed to be the second option at striker, but Altidore was playing most of the minutes. And Eddie Johnson, I don't think they like as a striker. They like him more on the wing. Donovan's a winger. Gomez has essentially become a winger, even though he's a pretty good holding striker.
Yep.
So there are opportunities to be had for this team, and somebody's going to have to take it because we're more talented than essentially any other team in this tournament.
Yeah, and honestly, you look at this team, and I could see Klinsmann. Obviously, I know that he probably, and I kind of wanted to stick with that 4-2-3-1 that we've been rocking in the full squad games, but I could see him going to a 4-4-2, which he did. He did that, I believe, against Italy in the game we got a draw there. He's done it in the past in a lot of friendlies. He's done it in a couple of qualifiers. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I know he's brought it out for periods of time at least, if not for a whole game. So then I think you could see McInerney paired with a Wando or paired with a Gomez. If you have two strikers, you could move Gomez up top fairly easily.
I think Gomez thrives in that two-striker system.
Yep, I agree. It's playing as a lone striker is not a role for everyone. As we even saw for the longest time with Josie, it wasn't necessarily his best position. He has the size to be a great holding striker, but he hasn't always done it with the best of his potential, you know?
Yeah, you could bring Bedoya in as that second striker too if you want to, really get creative. He's done it before. Yep. Landon obviously could be the second striker. It's just the way you formed. Do you want to put it two next to each other, or do you want to, do the Man United one up, one right on top of each other?
Play someone in the hole.
Yeah, which I think Donovan is really adept at doing that.
Yep.
So there's a lot of good options with the forwards, and I guess we'll start talking about the midfielders. It's a really, really nice midfield, I think, that they called in for this squad. Especially
when you start to consider that Donovan will probably be playing in one of those midfield positions as we talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, you look, guys, it's Beckerman, Torres, Holman, Bedoya, Corona, Mix, Discaroon, and Josh Gatt. And there is, honestly, with the exception of Beckerman, who, our opinion, I mean, I have no problem with Beckerman. We just, our opinion on him is well voiced. There are, I have no problem. I'd like to see pretty much any of those guys playing a lot in this tournament.
Yeah, Beckerman, I think, slides into the Jermaine Jones destroyer role. I think he's going to get a lot of time just because that's really what he does, and nobody else brings that to the table.
No, yeah, you're right.
Stuart Holden is the real wild card in this. Could he play next to Beckerman?
He could. I could think he can play in that number 8 role, that Michael Bradley, or he could even, depending on how he wants to, on how he's feeling. I think he's the kind of guy who could step up and even if he's feeling particularly offensive, play in that Dempsey. Probably maybe a little more committed to defense. He is a little bit more fitted as a traditional center midfielder, but he has attacking ability.
Same with Discaroon.
Yep.
Who essentially does the same thing, center midfielder with an attacking mentality. Gatt is hurt, so I don't know if he's going to be on this team.
Yeah, he's got his MRI. Have you seen it? Everything came back on that?
No, I've been checking, and I have not seen anything yet.
So right before we went to recording, that's when I was reading about his MRI.
Bedoya you can play on the wings,
Mm-hmm.
and he's been in kind of all crazy form in Sweden, scoring goals left and right. Corona, I think, is going to get the shot in the Dempsey role.
Yeah, I'm perfectly content with that.
Yeah, they gave him the number 10 for the qualifiers. I don't know if he's going to have it now because Len probably wants it back.
Yep.
But if you put Corona in that Dempsey role, and they need to see what they have with this kid.
Yeah.
Because he's talented. And then Jose Torres.
I can't believe he's only 25. My mind was just like, he is younger than both Holden and Bedoya. Like, I knew Holden was a little bit older than you might have thought about him because he spent a lot of time in MLS, college.
Yeah.
He did the more traditional path. But Torres is still 25. He still has some developing to do.
Yeah, and Bob Bradley played Jose Torres everywhere in the midfield.
Yep.
Just trying to get anything out of him.
And at left back.
Yeah, and aside from a few free kicks that, hit off the bar, there hasn't really been a Jose Torres moment, and he was so hyped coming in.
Yeah.
And he's talented. He plays well for Tigres, and he might even slide in next to Beckerman in that central midfield role.
Yeah, there's a lot of options.
Yeah, and they could try him again in the defense, because we'll get to the defense. It's a little shaky. But other than Beckerman, every single one of these midfielders is a really intriguing option. And no matter who plays, it's going to be interesting. One other note, if Mix gets in a game, which I'm sure he will, he's cap tied to the United States.
It's a big, big moment.
Yeah, because he's got upside. I mean, if you remember that Russia goal, that was a huge, huge goal.
I hope we can find a spot for him because he's a guy we've been hearing about for 3-4 years, back to when he was a teenager. And he's only 22, and he's born in 1990. Year younger than us.
Yep.
He presents a lot. I think he is probably the most natural replacement of these players for the Michael Bradley role. I think he has that same kind of. If you forget, Michael Bradley scored 13. I think it's 13 or 16 goals in a season in the Dutch league, pushing up a little forward. And I think that's something Gat can do, and he also provides a defensive presence. I would like to see him in. I'd like to see him in this. I mean, I want to see. As I said, I want to see all these midfielders. Can we start 6 across the midfield? That would be great. With Donovan as well.
Hey, you take care of business the first 2 games of the group stage. You can play whoever you want that third game.
It's true.
The thing I was going to say with Gat before the injury is, in those awful, just boring as hell Canada friendlies, Gat provided like the one moment of just energy and excitement, and that's something I really wanted to see for a full 90. Now with the leg injury, I don't know if we're going to see it or if we're going to have to wait, but he's somebody who I think has a really bright future. He and Diskerud both, and Corona is a really good player too in his own right.
Yeah.
So it's such an interesting midfield, and it really, the combination of the midfield, these young kids, and Donovan coming back, it really makes it a really intriguing Gold Cup, especially when other teams didn't really bring their A squads.
Yeah.
Mexico is going with a C or D squad with a few guys on the Olympic team, and that's about it.
Yeah, I think the one thing with this midfield, in other positions, obviously you look at some of the guys in the defense trying to make a name for themselves, trying to move on to the fringes, off the fringes, into the more of a potential starting role. The forwards, obviously, like Jack Mack, Wando, Bruin trying to work back into the picture, Donovan trying to work back. But the midfield, every single one of these guys has a not necessarily make or break for their entire career, but for make or break definitely for this cycle. I think Josh Gat's the one that hurts the most. I mean, I don't think it's a big issue if he doesn't get into the full team this cycle. But he's the kind of guy, if he comes in and he shows flashes, and Klinsmann sees that if you brought him into a game, he can provide, even if it's just 15, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, however much time you need, of just pure energy. He's the kind of guy who could be pulled into the full side. Mix is a guy that you want to see what you have, where he fits in best with this team, because he will have a place in this team. Probably not this cycle, probably next cycle he'll be an important player. Corona, you would need to know what you have. Bedoya, you think he could be that guy that could step in and take that role that we keep trying to cut out for someone like Benny Feilhaber, but it could be Alejandro Bedoya that takes that.
he could even take over what Eddie Johnson's been doing, coming in between the 60th and 70th minute on the wing. Eddie's done it pretty well, but Doya might be able to take it to another level.
Exactly. Torres is the kind of guy you want to see what he has, what he can really bring. Move him around the field. He's that same type of super sub. Stuart Holden, you want to see if he's back. This midfield is very. You can probably hear it in my voice. I am very excited about this midfield.
Yeah, and Kyle Beckerman's there to clean it all up.
And Kyle Beckerman is just hanging out.
Hey, he's got nice hair.
Kyle Beckerman do what he does best, hanging out, just chilling. Now moving back to the defense. Some very familiar names and some names that maybe a little less familiar. But you see DeMarcus Beasley and Akici Onyewu both in this squad, which I'm looking at the roster right now. Beasley, Onyewu, Goodson, all 31, all born within 11 days of each other.
It's ridiculous.
They all could be starting on that back line, and they probably will be actually.
Yeah.
I understand why Beasley's in this team, but I think this is a chance for someone like DeMarcus Beasley and as a reserve, Corey Ash. I don't think Beasley needs to be here, unless he asks to be here because he wants to be in the shop window. Because I know he's talking up a move. I'm not pretty sure why he's here. I think there's a chance we can get someone else. I think I would rather see Castillo start, to be honest. See what you really have in him, because he hasn't really shown anything in his flashes of he's supposed to be a guy step right into that left back spot, and he hasn't done anything to really make a case for that.
The thing with Beasley is maybe he doesn't think that his spot is really secure, especially how well Fabian Johnson played against Honduras. Maybe he thinks he needs to keep showing that, I got this spot on lockdown, because if he loses that spot, he's really in a rough spot on the team.
Yep.
And if I agree, I think I want to see Castillo start in this tournament. This is one where he shouldn't be overwhelmed by the competition like he was when Germany absolutely blitzed him. So, and he's still only 26. And then Onyewu, who injuries just ravaged his career.
Yeah.
And I think he only played something like 9 matches this year for Malaga on loan from, I think it was Sporting is where he was. If he has anything left in the tank to contribute, I don't expect him to be a full-fledged starter. But if he can show up and be that third center back, that'd be huge. And then we already talked about Goodson with the transfer moves. You know what you're getting from him. Not a lot of pace, but still dangerous on set pieces. Should be able to clear up any crosses into the box.
Yeah, I think this is a big chance for Onyewu. He needs to move. He's been trying to move to places where he thinks it's a big club and he can step in and do things. But aside from a brief spell at Sporting where he got some games, it hasn't really worked out for him that way.
Yeah, I think the whole AC Milan experience, coupled with a knee injury right before the 2010 World Cup, really, really set him back. And I think he tried to make up for lost time way too fast.
Yeah.
I think it really just derailed him to the point where now I think Michael Orozco-Fiscal could be getting a lot of time for this team at center back.
Yeah.
They might even want to move him into the center mid. He can do. He's a guy who can do a lot of things. He's also young. He's small, but he can play. And if Goodson or Onyewu slip up, and there's a chance that one of them might, I think he could be in a pinch.
Yeah, I think he's the kind of guy who, because he's also been brought in for a couple games. He had that goal against Mexico, which I think completely, if that's the best thing he does in his U.S. career, I think I'm okay with that. But he's like, you want to see where he can fit in if he has a chance to really step in and help this team.
And you want to see him defend, because what American fans remember him for is a goal, and you don't want your center back to be remembered for that one goal. You want him to be remembered the way Carlos Bocanegra's remembered, just for relentless defending, and the way you remember an Eddie Pope or a Jeff Agus, just for the way they defended. Michael Parkhurst, I think, is going to get a shot. He could play either right back, or you could even move him into the center if you really want to. He's been playing. I think he got brought into this team to play right back. I don't know how much faith Klinsmann has in Tony Beltran.
Yeah.
Who just got sent off in his last game, and I think I tweeted it was the rare double red card where two guys can get sent off for the same offense. He's played a lot for Real Salt Lake. I don't know how his game really translates. He might just be, the classic CONCACAF guy where you can play him in these types of tournaments, but
Yeah.
if you bring him into the World Cup, you're, saying a few Hail Marys before the game. Corey Ash is another guy who...
Tiny little man.
Yeah, 5'5". I don't know what type of future he has.
He's got a lot of speed, and he's a capable MLS defender. I don't think his physicality translates to that position against a lot of these teams that will need him to face.
Yeah, this might be his ceiling, is getting called up for these games, and the friendlies.
January.
Not a guy that you think is going to play a huge part of this team going forward. So I think Castillo's the one who has the most to gain from this.
Yep, and I think after that it's Orozco Fiscal.
Yeah, and even on Yewu, because we haven't seen him in a long time.
No, you think about how big a part he was of this team, 2006, 2010, and how quickly he's disappeared.
At his peak, he was probably the best defender this team ever had, but he's far from that.
It was Lawless and then him.
Yeah, him and Lawless are 1-2, and he was such a good player, and if he has anything left, it'd be a huge boost, because the way we're going right now, we're going to be starting. It looks like Gonzalez and Beasler right now have the two center back spots pretty much sewn up, and unless something happens, which
yeah,
it's a weird game, something could, but I just like having a Gucci Yewu around. He brings back good memories of the 09 Confederations Cup, which I wrote about, and how well he played in that game. But we'll see. It's a very interesting squad, and depth on the defense is lacking, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody who's a fan of this team.
Anyone that's listening to this one podcast.
Yeah. What's the problem? Defense everywhere. Every
single level.
Yep. We'll go through the goalies real quick. Ramondo, Johnson, Hamid. Ramondo start this.
I find it amazing that he only has 6 caps, considering how many times he's been called in. He's been that guy, always good to be number 3, never good enough to be number 2.
He took over from Marcus Hahnemann really well. The only thing, I guess, Tally Hall could have gotten a call in. Bill Hamid. I think Bill Hamid's in a really rough spot in DC right now.
Yeah, I think what you'll see with this team is that after the group stage, maybe you see Tally Hall come in as a guy just to get back into training camp and into the camp, because we're allowed to make 4 changes after the group stage. I can see one of these players going home just to get back and get some more games under their belt. Whoever the number 3 is that's not getting any games, and bring in Tally just to bring him back to the team. I wouldn't mind that.
I wouldn't mind starting a different one, kind of like what Spain did in the Confederations Cup. Start a different one each game just to see who you got.
Yeah.
This is basically an open competition for the 3rd goalkeeper spot. None of these guys are going to pass Howard and Guzan. They're a cut above these guys. So basically, let these guys fight it out, and they'll be playing with a little bit of pressure, and you always like that. So. You can bring in Tally Hall too. It's fun. Just open goalkeeper in the season.
The more the merrier.
Yeah, for the May camp it was a little bit of a questionable idea, but for this, who gives a shit?
Exactly.
Yep.
I think that just about covers the Gold Cup. As we said, these teams are not exactly anything to fear. Going Belize, Cuba, Costa Rica. Costa Rica will be the biggest test, but hopefully by that point we'll have 6 points and won't have to worry about it, which is ideal. But yes, should we break down any of these guys we think might make the World Cup team, 23 for 2014?
All right, I have the 23 for 2014 in front of me. Goalies: Howard, Guzan, Ramondo. Defenders: Gonzalez, Cameron, Beasler, Chandler, Castillo, Goodson, Beasley, Evans. Midfielders: Bradley, Jones, Zusi, Edu, Davis, Donovan, Fabian Johnson. Forwards: Dempsey, Altidore, Eddie Johnson, Gomez, and Boyd.
Any changes you really want to make to that?
Not right now. after this is done, there could possibly be up to maybe 5 changes. The one name that I think is important to look at right now is Brad Evans. Because he wasn't called into the Gold Cup squad. If he doesn't get called in to play right back once the group stage is over and, winning the tournament becomes the main priority, I think his spot could be in jeopardy.
Yeah, I agree. I think you saw him come in, you saw him play against Germany, and he did admirably. And his performances, they never were bad, but you kind of see that it was an anomaly, and that he's not. I don't think he's the answer going forward.
Yeah, the first half of the Panama game was really dicey. The Jamaica game wasn't that great up until the goal, which people will talk about the goal and they'll forget about. He was by far the weakest defender on the field for us that night. I think he might have to watch out. Goodson could play his way locked into that spot in defense, or he could play his way off this team.
Yep.
Same for Castillo.
Is Chandler on our pick? He is, right?
Yeah, we have Chandler in just because we went through so much to get him on the squad, and then he got hurt. Yeah. But there's a player who's playing in the Bundesliga and playing fairly well for Nuremberg. I think you can expect him to be starting at right back against Bosnia later in the summer.
Yep.
Maurice Edu, a strong Kyle Beckerman performance in this could knock him off the team.
Or Stuart Holden could even knock him off.
Yeah, a strong performance by any of the other midfielders that we have talked about could knock Brad Davis off this team.
Yep. Especially a Bedoya, a Torres, Corona. Oh, Corona's already on the team. Sorry.
No, Corona's not on.
Corona's not. Oh, wow. I'm getting confused.
Yeah.
I don't have it in front of me, I guess. Sorry.
Yeah, no, Corona's not on the team. We considered, I think, putting him in, but we never did. The other spots, Bradley Jones, Zusi, Donovan, and Johnson, Fabian, those are locked in unless Fabian Johnson moves to the defense, which I guess would be at the expense of a Castillo, where Beasley would end up being the backup. The forwards are interesting. Hercules Gomez could play his way off or play his way back on.
Or not play and play his way off just by the nature of not playing.
Yeah, a really good Jack McInerney performance, or even a great Wondolowski performance. I think Bruin's the 22nd or 23rd guy on this squad. I don't think he's going to get a lot of time other than maybe as a sub. But, you get a great McInerney performance, Terrence Boyd's spot becomes in jeopardy.
Just watch Will Bruin come out and score like 8 goals in the group stage.
Yeah, I'm going to have to apologize like I did to Clint Dempsey after the May camp. Yeah. Hey, if Will Bruin becomes the second coming of...
if he wants to come out and do that, I'm not going to complain about it.
No, I won't. If he decides to go Zlatan Ibrahimovic in this tournament, good for him. I'll kiss his ass for the next couple months. But yeah, Boyd has to watch out because in the brief chances he got in the May and June games, he did not look good. He made some really questionable decisions. I think Eddie Johnson is still okay. I think his spot.
Yeah, I think we'll have to, before we take him off, we have to see someone play their way into his spot here on this camp, and then watch them go head to head in August or in September.
He's good at least for the next couple months. Dempsey out the door, we're obviously not going to touch. Yep. And the goalies, for the first time ever, Ramondo's spot might be in jeopardy. I doubt it.
Yeah,
I think right now we're good where we are, but I think the next time there could be a lot of changes. Unless you have a change that you want to put in right now.
I really want to take out Brad Evans, but I don't know who would take his spot right now.
Yeah, it's really hard because Brad Evans, number one, is playing out of position.
Yeah,
it's the one position that has haunted this team, and Steve Cherundolo just went under the knife again, so he's not coming around to take that spot anytime soon.
Yeah, it would take an out-of-this-world performance from Michael Parkhurst in this tournament to really knock him out.
And there's no guarantee that Parkhurst is even going to start.
Exactly.
As good as if Tony Beltran starts and plays well, I don't think he can take it.
Yeah, it's such a strange... The Brad Evans saga is a strange thing.
I'd also love to throw Brad Davis off this team, but until we get these games going, we can't do that. I can almost guarantee you I'll find a way to get him off next time.
I love the difference. After last game, we couldn't wait to throw him on. A couple weeks of sitting around, not doing anything. We can't wait to throw him off.
I was sitting here getting ready to throw Luis Gil on the team, and then he played poorly against Ghana. So I think we're good where we are right now.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with sticking.
All right, so just one more time. Goalies, Howard, Guzan, Romano. Defenders, Gonzalez, Cameron, Beasler, Chandler, Castillo, Goodson, Beasley, Evans. Midfield, Bradley, Jones, Zusi, Adu, Davis, Donovan, Fabian Johnson. Forwards, Dempsey, out the door, Eddie Johnson, Gomez, Boyd. There's your 23 for 2014 as of right now.
And I believe that's all we have for today. Get ready to enjoy the exciting game against Guatemala, followed by the group stage of the Gold Cup. We'll be back here before the quarterfinals. Hopefully, if we don't make the quarterfinals, it'll be quite an angry podcast. If not, we'll be previewing the knockout rounds of the Gold Cup.
Yep, and remember, check out everything on Confessions of an American Soccer Junkie. We'll have a lot of Gold Cup stuff for you on there.
Yep.
We'll probably put our preferred 11s on there sometime this week after the Guatemala game.
Definitely.
Guatemala game and the friendlies will all be recapped. And any other questions, hit me up on Twitter at SAF5109.
Hit me up at PopkoDKG or at the blog handle at US_Soccer Junkie. And as always, keep reading the blog, as Fogarty said, and I will see you in a couple weeks.
Happy 4th of July, everybody.
Happy America Day.